about Dylan Raiola. Yes, we're going to talk about KJ Bolden. Those are kind of the five-star highlights, but this is all about, I guess, dancing in the wind right now when everyone in the world, every Georgia recruiting conversation right now, I guess you would call it Dylan Watch, Dylan Raiola Watch. Everybody wants to know what's the latest, what's going to happen, what's going on. We'll cover a little bit of that on DawgNation as well. We've also got, as part of our Big Five, we've got an interview with KJ Bolden. I'll give you a tease. Number 3 on the top targets list for 2024 on this weekly update. KJ Bolden was back in Athens again on Saturday. I believe it was his 12th visit to check out Georgia. We'll have a lot on KJ Bolden inside our Big Five. Usually the Big Five has a lot of 5 stars, but hope everybody's doing okay. Let me give some shout-outs. Shout-out to Facebook. Shout-out to everybody watching on Twitter, the DawgNation homepage, and, of course, YouTube as well. We've got a lot of stuff to get to. We got a lot of stuff to wrap in here. And, guys, I'm actually going to fold – it really feels like a Big Six today, but I'm going to fold one of the items of a Big Six into our Big Five. So it's going to feel like you kind of supersized your Before the Hedges today here on tonight here on DawgNation.com. So, all right, guys, let's jump in. First thing to talk about here, Dylan Raiola watch. I mean, you've got a lot of stuff going on. I think the main thing is everybody wants to know, is the 5-star quarterback ready? What's he waiting on? What's going on? Well, you got to remember, guys, this is a high school teenager's moment. Nobody out there can kind of influence or gas pedal that decision. It's got to be when he feels like it. The Raiola family, they kind of told me that they kind of felt like they rushed the first commitment decision without really being invested in knowing what they were getting into. So they'd always had the feeling that they were not going to jump right in and make that quick, hasty rebound commitment. One of the things to watch for here with Dylan, 6'3", 220 pounds, number 1 in the country as quarterback by everyone in the recruiting services. Recently, we saw that On3.com dropped his ranking to number 7 overall for their On3 rankings, but he's still the number 1 overall prospect for 24/7 Sports, ESPN, and Rivals. So one thing I wanted to focus on is, potentially, and it happens in every class. It was the same way with Justin Fields in Georgia for the 2018 class. It's the same way with a guy like Gunnar Stockton, who kind of got guys like, Oscar Delp to come in with him. Brock Vandegrift, Amarius Mims was a guy that really wanted to play college football with Brock Vandegrift. So, and Jake Fromm. I mean, what can you say about Jake Fromm? Everybody in the 2017 class. What usually happens for Georgia with marquee quarterback commitments, potential marquee quarterback commitments, is they want to kind of stack the deck with a lot of great players. And let's face it, if you're a big-time running back and you're a big-time wide receiver, or you're an incredible offensive lineman, you want to block for a guy with the talent level of a Dylan Raiola. You want to catch balls from him, especially if you're a running back. You know that you'll see a balanced front with a guy that can really connect and touch any part of the field with that rocket arm. So what we kind of put together is I know everybody's watching to see what's going to happen with Dylan, but the other thing I'm watching is kind of that we used this term many years ago on DawgNation to talk about a recruit that kind of transcends. And, a lot of these young men, they're very accomplished athletes. They have a healthy sense of themselves and independence. But when a big-time quarterback jumps into a class, well, that raises some eyebrows, and it gets folks' attention. So I got a bunch of names. We put together a slide. We're going to call it the Dylan Raiola effect. It would be names across the country to watch if Mr. Raiola chose Georgia. The first one, and that might be the hardest degree of difficulty here, is Jeremiah Smith. Those two knew each other when Raiola was still committed to Ohio State. Actually, Dylan Raiola decommits right about the same time, a couple of days. He decommits before Jeremiah Smith commits to Ohio State. Now, folks, Ohio State has been going gangbusters lately in recruiting. I think they've picked up 9 recruits in the last month, maybe 7 in the last 3 weeks. A lot of top 100 guys. They actually overtook Georgia, and everybody knows the reason why. They overtook Georgia over the last week in terms of the nation's number 1 overall recruiting class on the 27 Sports team composite rankings. But Jeremiah Smith, I think Jeremiah, even with a kind of tractor beam magnetism about the opportunity to play with Raiola. I think he's probably, most likely, you would say that he would stick with Ohio State as long as Brian Hartline sticks with Ohio State. Now, of course, you guys are probably thinking after a pylon 7-on-7 out at Lake Point earlier this year, we asked Jeremiah Smith what he thought, what would happen to Georgia's chances if Dylan Raiola committed to Georgia, and he gave everybody that little, shrug, and he raised his eyebrows really, really demonstratively, and he said there would be a chance, maybe even a good to great chance, that he would want to join Dylan should he chose Georgia. But I still label that one as pretty hard. Another name to look at here is KJ Bolden. KJ told me this week that those two guys are in concert a lot. They just talked this past week before G-Day for him. He would love to play with a guy like Dylan Raiola. The best wants to go against the best. He would love to be a part of a class like that. Those two guys talk a lot. And Dylan was actually trying to recruit KJ Bolden to Ohio State when he was committed there. So KJ Bolden, the number one safety in the nation, number 9 overall, that would have an impact on how KJ Bolden already views Georgia. Next name, that's Ryan Wingo. If you guys were watching the recruiting trail recently, Dylan Raiola, when he took his visits in March, he took a lot of them with Ryan Wingo. They visited Georgia together. That was planned. They visited Nebraska together. That was planned. Ryan even tells me that Dylan is his guy. Those guys are in concert a lot. That's a 5-star receiver, folks, a guy that's about 205 pounds, runs a 10.5, 10.6 in the 100. You're talking about a guy in Wingo and even Jeremiah Smith. The folks that rank these prospects feel that those young men are George Pickens-type talents. They're rated even just as high as George Pickens was, even higher than George Pickens was back when he was coming out of Hoover, Alabama back in 2019. Brandon Baker, the nation's number 1 offensive tackle. He just visited Georgia recently. We'll have an update with him on DawgNation.com this week. Brandon Baker, that's a guy, nation's number 1 offensive tackle in a really lean year for elite tackles that has taken an interest in Georgia. Got a lot of schools on his mind. Just visited Austin, Texas, and the Longhorns recently as well. And the next of these names would be like weapons. You've kind of got some bodyguards. You've got some, A1A type weapons in Wingo and Smith. A guy like KJ Bolden also plays receiver for Buford High School as well. But going down the list, Taylor Tatum, the number 2 running back in the country out of Texas. He's already visited Georgia. Jaden Riddell. Now, that's a name to watch for, especially after the Logan Thomas news this past weekend. Logan Thomas, this past week, when he decommits from Georgia, the name that really jumps on people's mind is Jaden Riddell out of Peculiar, Missouri. Those two guys talking to each other a lot, the same text messages, the same group chats. That's a name to watch there. Jaden Riddell is actually the number 1 overall prospect at tight end for 2024 for On3.com. Nathan Frazier, that's a guy you see his stock boosting up right here out of Modern Day in Santa Ana, California. That's another that's the same school as Brandon Baker right there as well. And you see him rising. I believe he's the number 8 running back in the country right now. That's a name everybody across the country would raise their eyebrows should Raiola choose Georgia. Another big bodyguard type protector, one of those guys that are the bouncers at the club trying to not let anybody get in. Marquise Big Easley out of Illinois, another guy that I think that should Raiola potentially choose Georgia, that's a name to look for there. And then another kind of local guy, Christian Clark out of Phoenix, Arizona. Dylan is from the Phoenix area. Number 20-ish, number running back in the country. Has a lot of ties to the state of Georgia, family, friends, people in his circle in the state of Georgia. And he's the number 257 overall recruit. So that's what's going on. Should Mr. Raiola, Dylan Raiola, choose the Dogs? Well, I think it's going to have kind of that tractor beam effect with a lot of guys who are already going to see back-to-back natties. They're going to see the NFL development. They're going to see the way Georgia plays in the nation's toughest conference. They're going to see the way the players kind of practice like nobody else right now in college football, and they wonder about if Georgia can add a 5-star passer like Raiola to that. It's really going to give guys a lot to think about in terms of potentially committing to the G. Next up, Recruiting Rewind. Not all the 5 stars are jumping in the boat to come to Athens. Some might be jumping out of the boat. And let's talk right now about the curious case of Landon Thomas. Now, that's a Moultrie, Colquitt County type boy out of South Georgia. Been committed to Georgia since last July, but I want to take you through a few things right here. Number one, Landon was actually, it's a recommitment to Florida State. Landon was committed to Florida State for about 6 months. Get this, Georgia offers, I believe, on October the 2nd. He decommits from Florida State on October the 3rd of 2021. He commits to Georgia in July of 2022. And he was kind of locked in with the Dogs. Florida State just kept punching, just kept chopping, trying to get him. And they pulled the flip this week. They pulled Georgia's only 5-star offensive commitment out of the class. Tight end U, which is what Georgia's been going down the road with recently, and how well Todd Hartley has been recruiting that position. Well, that's a win for Florida State. Not the only win for Florida State, if you guys are paying attention. If you're watching online chatter and what's happening right now, Jonathan Daniels, a big-time offensive tackle, probably the most athletic offensive tackle in the country right now out of Florida. He's actually leaning. You see a lot of things. He's got really strong feelings about Florida State. And also Georgia, another name we used to mention here on Before the Hedges a lot, brought to you by Kroger. We used to mention Cam Davis a lot, 5-star running back Cam Davis out of the Albany area. And Cam Davis recently, we'll touch on that, he recently shut down his entire recruiting, not going to give anybody any more attention, any more visits, any more officials. And he shut the door on his recruiting right there. So Florida State gaining some momentum right now with what they're doing. You see right there, that's the graphic there of Landon Thomas joining Tribe 24. And, Florida State's putting together a pretty good little team, especially if they can start adding pieces like Thomas and Davis. That's 2 5-stars in the class. We mentioned Daniels. They've already got a pretty strong team coming back. Florida State, will they be the school in the state of Florida? Not Miami, not those, as Brandon Adams always says, those lousy, stinking Gators that would make the move to kind of maybe surge a little bit with recruiting and surge a little bit in the state of Florida. Maybe that might be the Seminoles right there. Now, I teased something to you guys before. It's going to take a minute to kind of unravel this, but I think it fits really well in this recruiting rewind segment, because what we try to do is we try to kind of unravel or rewind, restore, kind of take a look back at the biggest stories of the week. And for me, maybe even more than the Landon Thomas story, was the new ruling. Now, this ruling was very confusing. I have sources at staffs. I know staff members, recruiters, coaches, staffs in every conference, and they were really confused by this. I'm talking about the NCAA rule on unlimited official visits. Now, a lot of that news when it broke had a lot of doom and gloom headlines. Number one is like, oh my gosh, these kids are going to take 20, 25 official visits. It's going to take away from their senior seasons. It's going to make these decisions even harder. It was kind of an overcorrection. No kid really needs 15 official visits. Maybe they need 6, 7, or 8, but they don't need that many. Well, I did some digging. I did some looking around, and there was some back and forth on that. Some initial reports I was being told was it didn't apply until the class of 2025. I was also told a bunch of other things. There was a lot of misinformation. I reached out to the NCAA compliance office, and I got some facts. Number one, it starts for every prospect in the class of 2024 that can take an official visit, and that will begin on July the 1st. There's really no limitation on visits for the prospective student athlete. That's good, but there's still the same limitation for how many official visits a school can offer. Like Georgia, the number is 56. Some schools over the last year got some exceptions because of a coaching change and because of some other blanket waivers granted by the NCAA, but the number is 56, and that's not going to deviate. So these kids can take as many, but you're going to see a school like Georgia and Alabama, Ohio State be very selective because maybe they don't need to grant one of their precious 56 official visits to a young man that's taking an official visit every weekend. That's kind of like the NIL type stuff there. You look at it, if a person comes to Georgia with their NIL handout immediately at the beginning of a recruiting relationship, it's probably not the player that Georgia is going to go after because they want guys that love football, that see the benefits of developing at Georgia and getting on that practice field, getting that elite top-tier coaching. That's the thing that they want folks to be drawn to with Georgia, and not simply just being the highest bidder. Kirby Smart says all the time that he wants guys to earn that NIL money at Georgia first before they come into the locker room and start making more money than starters when they haven't really done anything on the practice field or the playing field yet in Athens. So big development there. There was a lot of misinformation, but I thought one of the bigger recruiting stories of the last few years, because it's really going to change the way you look at recruiting. I know I spoke with DawgNation Daily about it last Friday, but I'll be honest, I'll keep it a buck right here. When I see all these young men dropping top 22s and dropping top 18s and top 15s, I'll okay, let's pump our brakes. Let's talk about it when things get really serious, when they start setting their official visits. Well, now if you see a young man that has 10, 12 official visits potentially in his deck, then when he drops the top 12, that's going to mean something. I think another thing it might help for is a lot of kids that live in the state of Georgia. KJ Bolden's a perfect example. He's already visited Georgia 12 times. He's the type of marquee recruit that whenever he takes an official visit to Georgia, it's like when he takes an unofficial visit to Georgia, that's like an official visit to other recruits, because Georgia kind of rolls out the red carpet for a talented player like that. Well, in years past, they're like, yeah, I'm going to save that official visit for an out-of-the-way trip like an Oregon, like a USC, like a Texas, like a Notre Dame, like a Miami. Well, now with unlimited official visits, that local kid in the state of Georgia can, why not, add another official visit to the list to go check out Georgia. That was not separate. That was just a little add-on here into our recruiting rewind. And moving on to our next subject, I think this is the week of the tight end on DawgNation, especially on the recruiting side. You've seen next-generation profiles on Pierce Sperling III and Lawson Lucky over the last couple of weeks. You saw Landon Thomas decommit from the Dogs and flip to Florida State. And I told you we were going through a position-by-position glance at the Georgia recruiting board for 2024. And just so happens, kind of way it was stacked out and planned out maybe, but tight ends are this week right now on Before the Hedges. We put together a great graphic to kind of take a look at it and go blow by blow. You got some names here. I'll try to give you guys a lot of intel, a lot of insight on all these names. First and foremost, Todd Hartley, the man likes to work ahead. The guy's the valedictorian of the recruiting room amongst tight end coaches in the country right now. He's only offered, besides Landon Thomas, 5 other tight end prospects in the country. Let's start with the first one. This is a young man out of Michigan, Brady Prieskorn. Now, he is a big guy, about 6'4", nation's number 2 tight end on the 24/7 Sports composite. Georgia has made his top 8. Interesting, his older brother, Caleb, I believe, is a transfer portal tight end who recently transferred to Ole Miss. So Ole Miss also made his top 8 as well. Georgia's in there. Michigan's in there. You hear a lot of traction there with Michigan right now, with Brady staying in state to play for the Wolverines right now. Second name on the list is the one we talked about with the Dylan Raiola effect early in our show. If you're just joining us, what potentially might a Dylan Raiola commitment to Georgia mean? Well, Jaden Riddell, we thought, out of Peculiar High School in Peculiar, Missouri. He is number 4 tight end in the country. That's a guy closely connected with Raiola. Been kind of talking back and forth behind the scenes. You see Jaden Riddell. He has visited Georgia recently. Jaden Riddell is likely to take his official visit to Georgia. Might not be that first week when everybody else is there, but maybe the second week there for Jaden Riddell. That's a name. Big guy. Been dominating some 7-on-7 stuff recently. Jaden Riddell is another name right there. The second highest rated tight end Georgia's offered. The number 3 is a recent offer, Caleb Odom, and he's about 6'5", 6'6", only played wide receiver for Carrollton High School for the Trojans. He was kind of the go-to guy last year for Juju Lewis, mostly working outside as an outside receiver. Georgia offered him on a recent visit, I believe it was last month. If that's a guy that Georgia, the news of Landon Thomas, if that doesn't bring any more traction with Georgia and Caleb Odom, I think nothing really will, but that's an in-state prospect to look at right there. Caleb Bolden's another 4-star, probably a top 100 recruit in the country. Carter Nelson, I like this guy a lot. Now, first of all, he's like a guy that participates in the decathlon. You see him, he's got high school track. He runs a 4.5. He's 6'5" out of Nebraska. He does the shot put. He does the javelin. You see him running the anchor leg on the 4x100. Like this stat here, he was a everywhere type gadget player for his high school team in Nebraska. Of course, Nebraska's big there for Carter Nelson. But he threw, I believe, 15 touchdown passes as a quarterback last year, but then also caught 11 touchdown passes as a receiver. He's kind of a jack of all trades player. You see what he's doing in track. Carter Nelson visited Georgia recently as well. And then the last name right here is Colton Heinrich out of Fort Lauderdale. He's at Cardinal Gibbons, and that's a very strong program. They throw the ball a lot down there in Fort Lauderdale. He's a 3-star. He was a first-team All-State tight end last year, only about 400 yards and about 3 touchdowns last year. But he is a 2-time state championship program, a 3-star recruit, ranked the number 27 tight end in the country. He has already said, reports from multiple outlets, is that he's going to give Georgia an official visit and Ohio State an official visit. So Colton Heinrich, kind of there's some big names right there to look at right now for tight end recruiting. Like kind of where does Georgia go after the loss of Landon Thomas in this class? Of course, folks, let's not poor mouth the Dogs with what they have at tight end. They literally have the best depth chart in college football at tight end right now, and they have the best future depth chart at tight end in college football right now. When you look at what, of course, Oscar Delp will be back next year. Brock Bowers will probably be a top 12 pick in the NFL draft in 2024, but Delp will still be around. You'll have Lawson Lucky, who's looked very good so far in spring drills and at G-Day. He'll be back for his second season. Pierce Sperling III will be back probably this time next year. We'll have his first healthy spring practice. Sure hoping for that for Pierce to have a long stretch of good health there. But then Georgia has a commitment from the nation's number 1 overall tight end in 2025 out of Charlton County in Folkestone. That's Elias Williams as well. That tight end depth chart room is going to look great, even given with what potentially Georgia could add in 2024. Folks, this feels like halftime of the big five, starting five, gimme five, whatever you want to call it. Now's a good time to think a little bit more about Kroger. You know, Kroger is our signature flagship sponsor Before the Hedges. Been that way, going strong now for over 8 years. And folks, you know anybody in your household that likes to clip coupons? I think my wife likes to clip coupons. I know a lot of other folks out there too. Go to Kroger.com, sign up to get all your digital coupon needs. And hey, if you get lucky, you might see some of that Easter candy still marked down. Way low price right there. If you want to get it done, you want to make your family feel like 5 stars at the table, just go Krogering. It's just that easy. Next up on the list, G-Day visitors. Now, folks, it was another robust guest list, whatever you want to say. Of course, 5-star KJ Bolden was here. That's coming up a little bit down the road real quick. Maybe only a screen pass now away in our show rundown right now. But G-Day had a lot of visitors. Some of the marquee visitors, you had 5-star commitment Ellis Robinson IV, 4-star commitment, anchor commitment Peyton Woodyard out of St. John Bosco. Sokovie White was there. Malachi Tolliver was there. And then some big targets were there. Aiden Breland, a big-time prospect out of Mater Dei High School, another defensive end who just picked up his 5-star status. You saw Justin Green, really impressive defensive lineman, the number 12 defensive line in the country right there. Look at there, representing 3TA Academy, training, trenches, technology. Got the Bass Pro Shops hat on. Now, right now, folks, I'll say this. Last year, if you believe in coincidences or whatever, one of the marquee visitors for Georgia for last year's G-Day spring game was Samuel Mpemba. He wore a Bass Pro Shops hat, and now you've got Justin Green wearing a Bass Pro Shops hat as well. Really like this guy's game a lot. Justin Green out of Mountain View High School. Moving on, you got Aiden Breland. Now, that's the guy I was talking about. Look at this big guy right here, 5-star. Mater Dei is one of the preeminent top 10 high school programs in the country. He took a visit to check out Georgia. There he is with Travion Scott. There he is with Kirby Smart. That was a big visit because if Georgia's going to look at that defensive line play and restock that defensive line cover, that's a guy that comes from a great winning program. That young man, I don't know if the pictures do it justice, but he is broad, he is thick. That's a guy you want plugging gaps in the middle so Georgia's all-world linebackers can flow downhill. He took a big visit. Now, I want to take you out this guy. Now, I'm going to try and make Miss Manziel laugh behind the glass here. Now, you're looking at these two guys right here. And one of those guys is a freshman in high school. And the other one is a rising sophomore, all-SEC, potential first-team all-SEC guy right there. The guy on the right everybody knows is Mykel Williams. Mykel Williams, Mykel's about 6'5" and about 265. And then the other guy to the left, he calls himself Thanos. All you cool kids that watch the Marvel movies, you know what I'm talking about. Thanos is the baddest man in the universe. It probably took like a whole squad of Avengers to take him down. But Thanos Stewart, now he's out of Louisiana. Folks, it's going to be dreadfully difficult to pull a player out of Louisiana, but the Dogs have been working. Again, guys, this is just a freshman in high school, and he's got a collection of standing next to dogs already. Last year, he stood next to Trayvon Walker and made him look just as small as Mykel Williams looks right there. He's 6'6", 285. This is going to blow folks' minds. Look how big Jakeem Stewart is right here, and he still has 3 more seasons of high school football to go. And he even lost like 30 pounds. He lost like 30 pounds to get down to 285. He's actually a slimmed-down version of Jakeem Stewart. When the 2026 rankings come out, Jakeem Stewart will be one of the 3 names that will probably be number 1 overall in the country. Georgia was his first offer, so very important there. Even though it's a class of 2026, Georgia had the faith in him to offer first, and that really galvanized him, he tells me, to be the player that he is. Loves going to Georgia. He was at Georgia for the national championship game. Not at Georgia, but he was out in Los Angeles at SoFi Stadium for the national championship game. He was at Georgia to watch them play Oregon and Mercedes-Benz a year ago. Some of his training partners in New Orleans, they have been at Georgia. Remember Sean Washington? That was the guy that he trained with in the same training group. So Jakeem Stewart, guys, very often does Jeff break the rule of, come on, man, folks do not want to hear about freshmen that have 3 or 4 more years to go. You have one that looks like that, you're going to hear about it on Before the Hedges each and every week from DawgNation.com. Next slide up, a lot of 2026 flavor right here, and you're like, Jeff, what are you doing? Another 2026? But let me take your attention to right here. Really cool moment right here. This is Kendra Harrison out of North Carolina, 6'6" with his shoes off. He's about 243 pounds. Right there, Todd Hartley, black belt ninja recruiter of tight ends across the country. He offered that young man right there. Now, Kendra Harrison has like 15 offers already, but nobody offered him on the field at Sanford Stadium before his spring scrimmage. We look at that. They're dapping it up. They're slapping hands. But look over there in the other side of the screen. Look up past Todd Hartley's shoulder. Can that mama's smile get any bigger than that right now? He was really happy. I spoke to Kendra about the offer. First of all, it's really cool seeing a kid get offered right on the field at Sanford Stadium. I thought 2 things by the reactions. 1, that kid either got an offer, or 2, that kid either got an offer and committed on the spot. He told me, like I said, it's his best day ever, and here's why. Look at this right here. You want to talk about meeting your idol, and you want to talk about what are we giving these freshmen in their milk and in their Cinnamon Toast Crunch or the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to look like this. That dude on the left, that is Darnell Washington, probably going to go within the first 40 picks of the NFL draft. That dude on the right is a high school freshman that is now offered by the University of Georgia. Kendra said that he was really geeking out talking to Darnell. Darnell actually gave him his number and said, hey, listen, young buck, you ever have any questions about this recruiting? You ever have any questions about training or moves you need to make? Just hit me up. I'll try to help you out as best as I can right there. And for that young man, that was like the ultimate. Like, it was like if you were a guitar player and you had a chance to meet Eric Clapton, for Kendra Harrison right there, that was what it was like right there for him to meet Darnell Washington. Huge, impactful visit right there. Those are kind of the things I saw about G-Day. Like, what else happened at G-Day? You know, another great visit. I think, guys like Ellis Robinson and Peyton Woodyard continue to show Georgia, put their best foot out there for Georgia. Elijah Griffith, the number 1 prospect in the country, according to some boards, out of Savannah Christian, out of Savannah, Georgia. 5-star defensive tackle. He was back in Athens again, enjoyed himself. But Georgia, the main thing you heard from a lot of the recruits that I've spoken to since G-Day is, folks, G-Day sets up as the perfect, I guess, commercial for Georgia football because there's so many young freshmen on the team. There's 18 freshmen on the team. You have the guys that have already left for the NFL. You have guys that have jumped into the portal. So really, it looks like a third of the guys on the field right now for Georgia are true freshmen. Everybody goes, wow, look at those freshmen playing. Look at all those freshmen playing for Georgia. And these young men, by assimilation, look down that field and they think, hey, that could be me. I'm not going to be sitting and watching my freshman year, even in a place like Georgia, a place that's won back-to-back natties. That's because Georgia gets their freshmen on the field really fast right there. Guys, we do it each and every week. We try to make sure our fifth spot in our DawgNation Big Five. Everybody hold up 5 fingers right now. Hold up 5 fingers right now because it's our 5th spot in the rotation, but it's also a 5-star. KJ Bolden, number 1 safety in the country. Why in the world would the nation's number 1 safety want to go to Georgia when the number 3 safety and the number 4 safety in the country are already committed? Why in the world do chicken fingers mean a big portion of his commitment? Eventual commitment. Why in the world does he like Georgia so much? Why does he keep coming to Georgia so much? Sit down right now, unbuckle your chin strap, take a listen right now. DawgNation conversation time with KJ Bolden out of Buford High School right now on Before the Hedges. KJ, what was yesterday about for you? Can you still learn things when you go to Georgia? What was the highlight for you yesterday?
Just watching Coach Smart, get after the guys, coaching them right up after they make a mistake. I see him, when the defense, give up a touchdown early in the game, he'll get on them guys and, tell them what to do. And, I see him, helping the linemen. He's just all over. I really enjoy seeing that from out of him.
If you did choose Georgia, how do you think they could help you develop into a player you want to be on Sunday?
Just like Georgia, all the players they got in the league, all them guys are balling right now, and they I guess they prep you early, as soon as you get there. I see they freshmen, they got freshmen like AJ Harris and number 5. I be forgetting his name, but they got and then all the receiver freshmen they got guys who already that looks like college ready, so I think they're doing a great job up there prepping the kids.
KJ, I think you've been there a lot of times, and I guess maybe one of the bigger appeals to would be playing with a guy like Peyton and a guy like Ellis. That could be an incredible secondary if you chose Georgia. What's the relationship like for you with those guys?
That's a great relationship with them guys. Them guys are cool. They're definitely trying to get me down there to Georgia with them. I'm only 40 minutes away, 50 minutes away. So, the relationship great though overall.
How do you think you guys would all fit together? Some guys would be nah, Georgia's already got the number 2 safety, the number 3 safety. I don't need to go and be about that. Why does that not matter to you?
I mean, it really don't matter to you because wherever college you go, you still got to work to earn your own spot on the field. So it don't matter if they got 3 safeties committed for if you commit there, you obviously got a reason, or you feel like you gonna work your way and get to the starting spot or rotating spot for sure.
KJ, you've been to so many schools, man. I would imagine you've probably visited at least 20, 25 schools. For you, all that knowledge you've accumulated and seeing all these places, how does it help you make your decision? What have you learned through your process so far that's really going to help you make the decision?
I guess just the people you're gonna be surrounding yourself around. When you get to them colleges, you gotta see the people in the locker room, how the program is really ran, and then see people you're gonna be around every day, and then that's how I really look at it. Do I really want to be around people every day? Do I seem like I would fit into this program? Yes or no? That's how I look at it.
KJ, what would it mean? Everybody wants to play with a class of top players. What would it mean with your attention to Georgia if Raiola chooses Georgia? What would that mean?
Me and Dylan got a great relationship. I was just talking to Dylan the other day, but if Dylan chooses Georgia, that'd be big for sure. And Dylan always talking though for sure. So, we definitely know the schools he's interested in. I hope Georgia gets out of it.
You think you're going to take an official visit to Georgia in June? I mean, that first weekend in June seems loaded, like it's Oscar night with all the guys that are wanting to come that week.
I'm not really sure because I think I might do the second week in June. I'm not sure. I'm trying to do the first week. That's when all the guys are coming. But I know if I was thinking about Clemson, but Clemson only got one official visit, so
Yeah.
if I don't do it the first week, then I'll have to wait till like after the season. So I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah, it's the same thing Sammy Brown said, man. He's like, yeah, Clemson's only got 1 week, so if I want to take an official, I got to go that week.
Yeah.
Did you get a chance to talk to Kirby yesterday? What was that like?
It was like cool, like always, like that's my guy. He always taking on the family, so it's the same thing. But that's my guy for sure. We always having great talks. There's much love from him.
Is your primary recruiter Muschamp or Kirby or both?
It's Kirby, Fran, and Coop.
Wow.
And I talked to Muschamp too.
They got 4 guys on you, huh?
Yep.
Like, what does it mean to you every time you go to Georgia? I can tell that you wouldn't keep going back to Georgia if you didn't like it.
I mean, it means like family. Them guys out there, they welcome you all. They welcome you in like your family, like you were part of their organization already. So definitely all love from Georgia.
All right, Mr. Bolden, KJ Bolden, if you got cliff notes of that conversation, let me speed dial them for you in right now. Wants to make his decision by August or September. He's always felt that way. He thinks the best way to go out is to win a natty. Not a natty, a state title for Buford High. Of course, Buford's really accustomed to that. One of the preeminent programs in the Southeast in the state of Georgia. Really likes that connection there with Kirby Smart. He told me in a previous interview, which is probably something that probably needs to go in a recruiting poster for the Dogs, but he told me once, I think it was in San Antonio at the All-American Bowl, he said, I get immaculate vibes every time I go check out the University of Georgia. And that sounds like a pretty cool thing. I guess if, when you're out there and you go into a club, you go into a restaurant, you go on vacation and you walk out to the spa, or you walk out, if you're getting immaculate vibes, that certainly sounds pretty good. I don't think Georgia can build immaculate vibes no matter how much they spend on their facilities, but if you got that immaculate vibe, I think that bodes well for recruiting. And KJ Bolden will be one of the top remaining targets for Georgia in the class of 2024. That's your Big Five, brought to you by Kroger each and every week. Now, guys, let's jump into it. Let's hit our weekly kind of table stakes, our weekly food groups right now. Let's take a look right now at the 2024 class breakdown. There's going to be a missing piece right there. People are going to go, oh, Jeff, that tight end spot looks pretty sad right there. That's where the 5-star Landon Thomas used to be. Where are the big uglies at? No OTs yet. Just interior offensive lineman Malachi Tolliver, out of Cartersville High School. Those are the guys that really get it done on offense. We always try to lead with them first because those guys clear the way for all those first downs and touchdowns. That wide receiver group, now we know our graphic staff, Casey Dunn, and even Kaylee Mansell right now working on some graphics for us. They're talented, but right now we're going to have to make that wide receiver spot eventually look pretty fat. That thing's going to have to get Jordan Davis size column width right there. I don't know how to do that. That's where I've got smart people behind the glass helping us out, but there's going to be a lot more room there for the wide receivers in this class potentially. The running back Dwight Phillips Jr., who can basically run across the state of Georgia in the amount of time we spend 30, 45 minutes each and every Wednesday night talking about recruiting. And then Ryan Puglisi. Guys, he took a visit to Georgia since our last show, took a 3-day visit, loves it, still recruiting for Georgia. I know everybody always asks me, dude, what's going to happen if that Raiola fella commits to Georgia? Nothing, I think, will happen if that Raiola fella commits to Georgia. I think that means Georgia's going to sign 2 quarterbacks in the class. That's what Ryan has led me to believe. I don't think it's just happy talk or the things you say right now. Ryan Puglisi really wants to be a Georgia Bulldog. That's your breakdown on offense. Remember, Georgia is now down 1 5-star after the loss of Landon Thomas. And then, again, what you see right now, the guys up front, not a lot cooking right there for the guys up front yet. One thing Georgia likes to do is they like to get the big guys in during camp season, the first week of June, first couple weeks of June, and work them out against each other and let the real men, the real cream of the crop of the class rise to the top. Linebacker DeMarcus Riddick, guys, I'm going to tell you, continue to watch that one. I don't think that one is a done deal. You've got Auburn, you've got Alabama that are hovering around that recruitment. He's in the state of Alabama. Georgia remains his number 1 school. He says that to a lot of reporters, but those two schools are going to keep coming. Perhaps the only other big-time running back linebacker target for Georgia would be Sammy Brown out of Jefferson High School. Georgia's not going to take a lot of linebackers in this class. And, Riddick is the nation's number 2 linebacker in the class, and Brown is the nation's number 1 linebacker right now. You see 2 5-stars in that group, no 3-stars, and then 4 3-stars. If you look at that, guys, DeMello Jones is basically the only guy in this class that is not this defensive class right now that is not a top 100 national recruit. I think he's on the fringe right there at around 109, 118 overall, but DeMello might have as much upside as anybody on this board. That is your class breakdown right now. Georgia is down to 11 commitments after the departure of Landon Thomas. And, one thing we're looking at right there is we're going to take a look at the 2024 recruiting snapshot. They are down to 11 commits. The class rank is number 2 nationally. There's 6 guys on offense, 5 guys on defense. Ranking breakdown, Georgia has 2 5-star commits. Now those guys are both on defense. 4 top 50 commits. Those are all the national guys that are shoe-ins for the All-American teams. 4 guys on defense. 6 of those guys are on top 100s. 4 defense, 2 offense. And again, we stress this a lot, guys. This is the year where Georgia's class needs to counter last year. Last year's class, you guys saw them at G-Day, so many tremendous defensive standouts. Now this class needs to get left-handed, where last year's class was right-handed, and they need to counter with a lot of playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. Dylan Raiola, should he choose the Dogs, I think he's going to go a long way towards helping towards some of that. We discussed that in our opening Big Five. Right now there's 5 commits out of state, 5 commits in state, 9 commits in the SEC footprint, and 2 commits beyond the SEC footprint right now. You look at the offensive commits, Nye Carr, the teammate for Landon Thomas, who still seems very strong. I don't know if you guys saw on social media, some folks were chatting that Nye Carr might be next to join Landon Thomas in Tallahassee. But even though the proximity really works there for FSU and some talented players, some talented All-Americans from Colquitt County, Nye Carr kind of shut all that down, said he's not visiting this weekend, last weekend, and he still remains a Dog. Remember, Nye Carr a couple of months ago shut down his recruiting and said he was all Dog. You see 5 offensive players among the 10 highest-rated commitments right there, and the state with the most commits right there is the state of Georgia, which has 5 commitments right there. There's your 2024 recruiting snapshot right there. And now it's top targets time, guys. Raiola, of course, is on the list. It's funny. I go back and watch these shows, and one of the things I try to do is I try to kind of see what the people are asking about, and I'm watching along with you, and I'd like some feedback on this topic. When you guys see the top remaining targets, do you go from 1 all the way back up to 14, or do you go from the top and read down to the bottom? I think I've got an answer for what you guys try to do, but Jeremiah Smith, I think the recent commitments to Ohio State have kind of strengthened his commitment there to Ohio State. That's why you see his name drop a little bit. Justin Scott, the 5-star D-tackle, going to take his official visit to Georgia first weekend in June. Justin Scott was at Miami over the weekend. Dylan Stewart, I think Dylan's going to take some visits to Georgia in the month of May. I think you will see Dylan there that first weekend in June. That rock star Oscar Knight. Jordan Ross, I continue to tell folks about Jordan Ross. He's a 4-star. He's highly rated. He's a 5-star for 24/7 Sports. He's about 6'4", 215, clocks a 4.4. He's out of Vestavia Hills, Alabama, but he is going to leave the state of Alabama. That pulls Auburn and Alabama, the 2 most likely contenders, out of that equation right there. Mike Matthews out of Lilburn, Parkview. Some folks, some polls and some recruiting services have him as the number 1 prospect in the state of Georgia. Christopher Jones right there. I think that would get very interesting for Georgia, depending on what happens with Sammy Brown, depending on what happens with DeMarcus Riddick. He's out of Stafford, Virginia. Christopher Jones has also set up his official visit to those Gators in Gainesville. I think he's visiting Florida the first weekend in June and Georgia the second weekend in June. Daniel Calhoun out of Walton High School, always been a fixture on the top targets board. Rated as a tackle. I think he's an offensive lineman in college. Got to send a shout out here all the way down at Statesboro for Cam McKell right now. a player that I always thought was kind of criminally undervalued by a lot of the recruiting services. He's a big guy, plays basketball, great track speed, 10.7 in the 100. He just got a ginormous boost from On3.com. I think he moved all the way up into number 56 overall recruit in the country from being unrated. And Cam McCall has been on the Before the Hedges top targets board for at least the last couple of weeks. These names, you got to heard them before. Jaden Riddell, we've talked about a lot about him. That is a new entry all the way up to number 6 on the remaining top targets. He becomes the top target in the class at tight end after the decommitment of Landon Thomas, and especially now with Landon no longer in the class, Jaden Riddell moves up into the top targets board as well. Ryan Wingo recently reported, I believe, first by 24/7 Sports. Ryan Wingo is going to take his official visit to Georgia that first weekend in June as well. We've been saying this for months and months. Justin Green, tremendous in-state prospect. He was at Georgia for G-Day, top 100 recruit. Really has done a lot to take what he already had with his God-given ability and improve himself. KJ Bolden, amazing target in this class. He was part of our DawgNation Big Five. Edric Houston, Clemson's in that thing. Ohio State's in that thing. Georgia's in that thing. And number 1, we've said his name. Maybe we should come up with a bingo counter or something like, or have a chime of a bell here as a production element on the show. Every time the name Dylan Raiola appears or is said or chatted about on a DawgNation.com Before the Hedges program, maybe we ought to do something. Maybe that ought to be a mini game where we all do like 5 sit-ups or 5 push-ups and get real healthy every time somebody says the name Dylan Raiola. Those are your top remaining targets just off the list. These are the guys that DawgNation should have on their radar as well. Brandon Baker, we've talked about him a lot, number 1 offensive tackle in the country. Just visited Georgia recently. Chauncey Bowen's currently a Florida linebacker commit. A lot of these running backs you see, Sammy Brown, we've talked about him. Chris Cole, Cam Coleman. Cam Coleman out of Alabama, guys. You watch him in 7-on-7s. Might have as much upside as any receiver in the country. And I'm going to tell you what I'm going to look at right now. I'm going to look at Cam Coleman out of Phoenix City, Alabama, which is basically maybe a 3-iron away from Auburn, Alabama. I'm going to look at Cam Coleman's recruitment, and I'm going to go, how well is Hugh Freeze going to recruit for the Auburn Tigers? You know, everybody talked about they had a war chest of NIL money that Brian Harsin didn't have access to because he never really proven himself a long-term coach there. I think Hugh Freeze has access to those recruiting resources. It'll be very interesting to see if Cam Coleman, everybody in the country wants him. Georgia would take him in a heartbeat in their wide receiver class. I'm going to watch closely and see what Auburn does to keep Cam Coleman in the class. And if Cam Coleman can stay in the state of Alabama, that will, to me, say that Hugh Freeze has some staying power with the Auburn Tigers. Marcus Downs out of South Carolina recently visited Georgia as well. That's a 3-star defensive lineman. He gave Georgia he's going to give Georgia an official visit. Marquise Big Easy, he's going to give Georgia an official visit. That's that first weekend. That thing has been planned since like February. Walt Claire Flynn, that's a guy to watch here out of Grayson High School. That's a guy that Georgia seems to me like they have turned the heat up on in the last few months. Colton Heinrich, we mentioned him in our tight end recruiting outlook. C.J. Jackson, Georgia's going to get an official visit there. Amir Jackson is another guy to watch at, the guy out of Portal High School in the 9-1-2 with tight ends now. Amari Jefferson, Georgia is one of his top schools out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. He is a Tennessee baseball commitment. Jimothy Lewis as well. He's at IMG Academy. You're going to see a name down here on the list, Jordan Seaton. Still is a major target for Georgia. One of the top, I think he's still the number 1 interior offensive lineman recruit in the country. Jordan Seaton has moved to play for IMG Academy as well. I think that helps Georgia's chances there. Taylor Tatum, Jordan Thomas, big-time defensive lineman right there. You've got Jamonta Waller, probably the best player in Mississippi. You watch his tape, you get kind of Nakobe Dean-type vibes there. Can Georgia go into the state of Mississippi and get a Jamonta Waller like they did a Nakobe Dean in the past, like they did a Branson Robinson in the past right there? Carter Nelson, you also see him on the list. Williams Winery out of Lee Summit, Missouri. Now, he's established and released 4 of his official visits. Georgia's not one of those official visits. I would still look for Georgia to be that 5th official visit, and he's coming to Athens. I think that first weekend in June is probably the best weekend that he can place himself right there. Guys, that's your just off the list. Now know what it means. The time for right now. It is time for our live Q&A. We're going to go live from our Woodstock Bureau. I'm going to jump on. I'm going to have my microphone. We're going to talk about Georgia recruiting for a couple of minutes, and I'm going to be looking for a comment from Leon White out of Sandersville. Leon, I apologize for not getting to you the last couple of weeks. I try to facilitate and answer as many questions as possible. You got your recruiting questions ready? Let's do it right now on Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. This is our live Q&A. What's up, DawgNation? It's Wednesday night, Before the Hedges. Walkers around. Hope everybody's having a great night. Guatemala Mike, how's everybody doing? Everybody on Facebook. Question, Randy Payne. We got some crews going. Quickly, anybody on the feeds, Facebook, YouTube, I'm going to try and monitor both of them. Anybody going to be on the DawgNation cruise this time next week? We're going to be on the boat. We're going to be all around the Caribbean. Just check in if you guys are going to be with us on the DawgNation cruise. Next week, our second annual DawgNation cruise. Tell you folks, every time we go on one of those cruises, the dogs win a national championship afterward. UGA Boy for Life, Brunetti, how are you? Guatemala Mike, if Georgia was to get a certain QB in the 2024 class, how many would probably come into the class as a result of his commitment? Better question, maybe how many are already in the class, but I think there's about three or four really big names that, all things being equal, Raiola, should he choose the dogs, will push the candidacy over the top. As we talked about at the top of the show, I think he's really close with a lot of select players in this class. A lot of select players in this class. Class of 2024, especially across the country. Ridgey Fly, thank you for that. John Adams wants to know, bigger arm, Dylan or Dom? Guess I read Ryan. Yeah, Ryan Puglisi has a 93-mile-an-hour fastball, 94-mile-an-hour fastball. I don't think Dylan dialed it up while he was still playing baseball that high. Let me see. Christy, how are you doing? Let me see. We got some talk about the Caribbean. We got some talk about Indiana Jane. And Christy got an anthropology major. Great for her. Who made it to, oh man, Johnny Surf Dog's talking about ruins in Guatemala. Very intriguing, very cosmopolitan show we got tonight here on Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. Very cosmopolitan, as I'm going to try to say that in my favorite Doc Holliday voice. One of the things, I hope our friend Leon White is with us, but he wanted to know, he had a question about Jared Smith. Now there's a Jared Smith. I think I saw his question a couple weeks ago, and I had an inkling who he was talking about, because Jared Smith, who was actually at G-Day again on Saturday, is a big time edge prospect, 5-star in some lanes on the recruiting web, on the web about recruiting at a Spain Park High School. But the Smith brothers, he was talking about 2 guys in the 2024 class. And those young men are taking a lot of visits together, want to potentially play together. And Leon, to answer your question, I don't really hear a lot of information about those 2 guys with Georgia. I think Notre Dame is a school that you check around, kick some tires. Notre Dame might be a school for one or potentially both of those guys right now, but Georgia with the Smith brothers right there. I don't think that's really Georgia's top targets for the edge position, defensive in and outside linebacker position that like one of those guys I know plays. I hope that answers your question. And again, Leon, man, sorry. Anybody that's from Sandersville, Tennille, I got some folks, had some family that live back there, work back there. The Dairy Lane in Tennille, in Kaolin country, the Dairy Lane in Sandersville. If you've ever been through there, you will never forget it. Guatemala Mike Bear is not in the mix. Are you talking about Bear Alexander? Or are you talking about Gatelin Blair out of Idaho? He's established his top 5. Georgia is not in his final 5. And also that young man, fast receiver as he is, he's running faster than Dwight Phillips Jr. is right now as a receiver. He also has a Mormon mission to deal with. Let me see. Score check. What's up with Sammy Brown? I think the Dogs' chances for Sammy Brown have probably never been higher than they have been over the last couple of weeks. Jack Marino, thanks for being in church. Jack Marino, yes, we've been talking about Ryan Wingo. Johnny Surfdog, a lot of 5-star running backs on the radar for both 2024 and 2025. Taylor Tatum is not a 5-star. Jarrett Gibson, who's going to visit on that official weekend Oscar night in the first weekend of June at IMG Academy. He's a 5-star, but I don't know if Georgia will wind up with him. You hear a lot about Texas with them. Ridgefly throws it out there. Does everybody want the Georgia boy or Jaden Radell? We'll say Jaden Radell can fly. He is very fast. Yeah, Jerry Dogs fan was hoping Landon would stay in the class. I hope you guys saw the first of the show. I thought it was fascinating how he was committed to Florida State for about 6 months. Georgia offers, he decommits the next day, and then he's committed to Georgia for not quite a full year, like maybe 9 months. And then, down there in Tallahassee, they keep working on him. It's really close. And I thought the Dogs were going to hold on a little bit longer there at least. But Florida State, guys, let me say this. I'm going to say this again. I'm going to underscore it. Florida State's really picking up some momentum with what happened with Cam Davis, with his shutting down his recruitment, the 5-star running back, have a 5-star tight end. Jonathan Daniels is a guy that hasn't visited Georgia recently when Georgia kind of really needed him to in March and April. And Florida State's the team to trend for there. I think Charles Lester is a guy that visited Georgia 3 times. And I think Georgia is really set a corner with Ellis Robinson IV and DeMello Jones. But that's a guy potentially would have probably loved a spot in the class at Georgia, probably going to wind up at Florida State as well. Florida State, we just mentioned 3 5-stars they could get in the 2024 class. First of all, everybody, thank you for joining us again tonight. Definitely, that's not a wrap up. I'm just saying thank you. I'm always grateful. Grateful seeing everybody up there. Sonia Prescott was worried about Landon. David Willingham, I think it's interesting. If you want to talk about Jaden Radell versus Landon, I think Landon's the more complete tight end right now. He's attached. He's in line. He's flexed out. He ran some Wildcat. He's a blocker, probably a more complete tight end. And I think Jaden is more of a speed flex guy right now. Big kid, don't get me wrong, but I think right now both of these young men have very bright futures. I think Landon has just done a lot. I think that's what you look like when you see what Jaden can do. Yeah, I agree with you. Radell does look more dynamic. Caleb Squires, if Dylan Raiola chooses Georgia, I do not think the Dogs lose Ryan Puglisi. Yeah, Randy Hall, I'm here. So Barry Watkins, good question. If Dylan commits, and whatever it might be, potentially if he joins the class, next year's stable would be Beck, Brock Vandegrift, Gunner, Pug, and Dylan. I would imagine, Barry, with that hypothetical right there, in that situation there right now, I think Beck is really primed to have a great year at Georgia. I think he's primed to have the type of year where puts himself in NFL consideration. He is already an NFL consideration if you look at the way he throws the football, height, weight, prototype size, and everything else. I think if he has an all-SEC type year, he's a guy that could declare for the draft. And I think that would work out pretty well. And I think Beck would be a first, second round pick type at quarterback. I think I wrote about this recently, but if, one of those two, whether it's Beck going to the NFL or Brock Vandagriff not staying a second year in Athens as the backup to Beck, I think one of those two will kind of, hopefully it works out for the best. Maybe Beck gets a year, makes his run to the NFL, plays great football for Georgia, and then that slides in, opens up a spot for, by that point, a very experienced Brock Vandagriff to come in there. And I know a lot of stories tonight. I see them all across my feed, my timeline about, Brock Vandagriff deciding to come back. I don't know. That was never really a concern. The information I always had with Brock is, number one, he loves Athens. He loves hanging out with Brock and Chaz Chambliss. Those guys all live together, and they eat probably half a horse for the day between the three of them. But big, strong, very hungry, very, very stout young men. They're going to go through some groceries. Groceries that you can find at Kroger probably take care of half an aisle themselves most weeks. But Brock Vandagriff's going to graduate this fall, and I always thought he was going to give Georgia a chance until he graduates at least, and that would be through the end of this season. Didn't make a lot of sense. That was the information I'd been gotten for the longest time regarding Brock Vandagriff. Barry Watkins, good question there. Wendell Brewer answered the question about Sammy Brown. Alan Frazier, if you look across a lot of the off the list, I think you'll see Chauncey Bowens is a guy, North Palm Beach, currently a Florida commitment. Now, Chauncey's a big back, like 230 pounds, and he is a guy that runs track 10.8. That's the guy that would be the big back. But the other two names to look at, you got Christian Clark, the top 200-ish type running back out of Arizona. And then you've got also a new name, Nathaniel Frazier out of Mater Dei High School. That was in those guys that I think would potentially be interested in where Dylan Raiola goes to play college football. The other one is Taylor Tatum, out of Longview, Texas. Taylor's the number 2 back in the country right now. Really strong tape, really strong all-purpose back. Tony Prescott weighs in with a prediction about a quarterback commitment. Yeah, double Y. Big fan of Micah DeBose. He got his 5th star on On3. Michael Hoffman, I don't think Georgia's going to be that active in the portal. I don't know if there's a whole lot of room right now. I think Georgia will look maybe for a defensive lineman, running back, those type of guys right there. But those really great, strong players are pretty hard to find. Yeah, it was, hey, Jerry Dogs fan. Usmani Chroma at Lee County. He's another 5-star. He was at G-Day as well on Saturday. John Adams, they just do things differently. Your question about Clemson right there. Clemson, they stress family. They stress doing it once during the season. They only offer about 50 kids. So they bring in about 10, 12 for official visits. That's kind of parlay for what they do. But they only have one weekend in June for official visits. And then after that, kids got to come in later. So a lot of guys that really have Clemson among their top schools, they look at it as, well, I want to give Clemson a visit, but then I want to give these other schools a visit. But it's kind of like algebra. If you want to have Clemson involved in your equation, you got to choose that first week. And a lot of them, like Sammy Brown, KJ Bolden, and others, they realize they can get Georgia with another official visit weekend. Bryce Dixon, man, sorry we can't get you. One of these years we'll get you on the cruise, man. It'll feel like we're back in Sea Island again, man. Suzanne Mize, how are you? Y'all, I do think the Deuce Robinson, the recruitment of Deuce Robinson is over. Corey York, Kevin Riley was, if you're talking about the running back Kevin Riley at Tuscaloosa, Kevin Riley, I never reported that Kevin Riley was going to be at G-Day this weekend. My information had him being at Miami, and that's exactly where they wound up. All right, guys. Hey, that's been a Before the Hedges brought to you by Kroger. First of all, going to reiterate, most importantly, guys, do thank everybody for stopping by. If we got so many great graphics people now, all of a sudden at DawgNation, got them coming out of the ears. I think one of the things I might ask him to do for some homework for shows to come is I'm going to be like, can we get a sign that says just thank you guys for stopping by, and we flash it towards the end of the show. I mean, really, guys, it's just great talking recruiting, talking Georgia football, trying to do everything I can here with answering as many questions as I can for you guys regarding Georgia football recruiting. Lots of places you guys can go to, turn to get it from. We're thankful that you guys make Wednesday night a big factor in where you got try to come and to consume a lot of your Georgia football content. I dearly appreciate that. You guys don't know how much I appreciate you guys showing up and showing out and interacting and engaging on this show every Wednesday night Before the Hedges. Before we got to go, I got to be a humble man. I got to say thank you. I got to say thank you to Casey Dunn, Kaylee Mansell, Michael Carvel, everybody behind the scenes that makes DawgNation go. Got to thank KJ Bolden for the chance to talk to him pretty in depth over the weekend to see where he was at. Everybody, there's so many interviews after a weekend, after a big visit weekend like that. And I thank everybody that's out there taking the time, taking an interest in what we do with DawgNation as well. Anyway, guys, I'm Jeff. Everybody on the podcast, if you want to get on the podcast, SoundCloud, Spotify, shout out to everybody listening on the podcast right now. Certainly appreciate you guys engaging with our content as well. But for now, I'm Jeff Sentell. That's been your intel, and we'll see you guys again later on the pages of DawgNation.com. Have a great week, everybody. See everybody on that cruise boat, and God bless you. And we'll see you again here next week on Before the Hedges.